All right, I'm gonna start my speech. Oh wait, I'm gonna put on my headset in case. All right, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Indigenous people have always consistently consumed natural resources that alter human consciousness because it's an ingrained part of their culture, right? The problem is that they're stigmatized, for example, as being, like barbarian and savages, for example, because of this. But thankfully, the ideas of natural resources, drug use and consumption have more likely to shift, right, in the current status quo, for example, towards the better. It's not as savages, but it's not necessarily accepted by a lot parts of the majority, right? So we think that environmentalists needs to actually actively promote these particular drug use, for example, exactly because it is in line with the survivability of the actor they want to protect most, but also it's going to inherently be better for them as a movement, for example, exactly because it makes it easier for them to do their job in protecting the environment, right? So OG says that it is they should support exactly because all of those things. So several mechanisms before we move on, right? I think it's important to know this debate operates on places where recreational natural drug consumption is inherently a legal thing, for example. So we don't necessarily have to break the law. It talks about like places like Netherlands, for example, places in Europe where it's inherently already allowed for them to consume this, right? But secondly, I think we need to emphasize on the idea of natural resources drug use, right? That alter human consciousness. Talks about mushrooms, for example, that are natural, that you can, like makes you trip for a couple of hours with no long-term effect, for example. Natural marijuana, for example, that actually makes you feel good, loses your stress, and so on and so forth. That is to say that opposition cannot argue that, oh, it's drugs, therefore it's bad. Exactly because it's natural, it doesn't necessarily alter your ability to, for example, like addicted, for example, in comparison to drugs that are already manufactured, that inherently is targeted to make you consume more because it's a part of capitalistic system, for example. These drugs that we're talking about is scientifically proven to benefit in terms of anxiety, depression, and so on and so forth, right? So our argument lies on two folds. One, on the idea of indigenous people's protection, but two, on the idea of organic consumption, both of which are consistent with environmentalist values, right? First things first, indigenous people's protection. That drug consumption has always been an integral part of the indigenous people's culture, right? Talking about how it's a way for them to actually access the higher being, for example, when they feel like they're in a higher consciousness at the end of the day, right? This means that environmentalists this means that these people necessarily use these drugs, for example, as a way for them to practice their culture. That inherently, these cultures that we're talking about are cultures that inherently fights for the idea of betterment of humans. Right? Talking about like it's a way for them to access the green gods, for example, that allows them that gives them mandates to protect the environment and so on and so forth. Right? These are the people who are most vulnerable because they are the most marginalized according to environmentalists. Right? Talking about how their interest to protect the earth aligns with environmentalists, right? How more often than not, natural native and indigenous peoples, like Native Americans, for example, are the places where it's most green, for example, because they are actively participating in this, right? So they're the ones that are also most harmed when environmental damages actually exist, right? So at the end of the day, the problem then is that their lifestyle and how people perceive these indigenous people that we're trying to protect is inherently not that good, for example, because natural drug use has always been seen as stigmatized by racist Americans, for example, who sees this as a form of barbarians, for example. How historically, when white people go to Mexico, for example, they necessarily ban all, for example, like the idea of drugs because it's always associated with the poor, for example, or associated with the idea of it being bad and hampers you, and it's a culture of people who are savages, right? Exactly because they are the ones who need our help most, and they are the ones who are in line with our ideals. Therefore, we need to protect them, right? Because for these people, even in modern era, natural drug consumption is a form of business model for them, right? In which they proliferate, and they're the ones who publish it, right? Because then their survivability is also reliant on this natural drug consumption, right? So it's good when you promote that idea, right? Because one, it normalizes the natural drug use consumption exactly because it makes normal people relate more to the idea of, oh, okay, it turns out it's not something that's inherently bad, for example. It's also good for me, right? Environmentalists will, of course, like highlight the benefits of natural drugs, for example, why it's good and so on and so forth, why it's safe, so on and so forth, and people are more likely to inject the idea, right? Especially because the ones who are promoting it are not the people that they hate, like the natural savages or whatever, but people who are fellow whites, for example, who are supportive of natural environmental causes, for example. So it makes them more receptive to the idea at the end of the day, right? Which is good because it humanizes the actions and cultures of these indigenous people at the end of the day, showing them that, okay, even though I'm a white person, I also, for example, is able to relate with that culture. I can see the benefits, for example. It makes it easier for us when we want to fight for these people's ideals and fight for these natural indigenous people's culture, because now people who are in the, like people who aren't part of that can access, or at least I can relate to why the culture needs to be protected and why the culture is important, right? Which makes them more receptive to all of the efforts environmentalists put to when they want to protect, for example, these indigenous people's culture and home at the end of the day, right? But two, why it is consistent with the values of organic consumption that we want, right? We think that among other things, what environmentalists need is people that are willing to support the idea of organic consumption, right? This looks like people supporting, like not eating manufactured products that creates tons of waste, for example, that creates tons of, emissions or so on and so forth, because it's a product through like machineries, factories, and so on and so forth, right? We think then it's better when people consume organically, right? But the problem is that organic consumption has a stigma in society that is something that is hard, for example, or something that is untasty. It's inherently, all things that are organic are bad, for example, because it's not given the taste or that you need, for example, to make you feel good, right? Drugs specifically is inherently a unique way of us to actually promote the idea of organic consumption, right? Because these drugs are essentially focuses on triggering serotonin, for example, in your brain, exactly makes you relax, for example, makes you feel good, right? This is one of the best ways for us to actually promote the idea that don't panic, it's organic, exactly because people are now associating with the idea of organicness as something that makes them feel good, right? That natural, things that are natural are really things that are good for you, for example, things that make you feel good, exactly because it targets the specific chemicals in your brain that targets the idea of serotonin, targets the idea of happiness, right? So drugs kind of habituates people to actually think of organic consumption as something that is good. This is good, right? Because on opposition, it's hard for you to break the idea of organic consumption as something that is inherently beneficial, exactly because the everyday consumption of manufactured things are already ingrained within the people, right? Only through promoting the organic drug use, it's the only way you are able to break free of these particular ideas, therefore able to put in all of the organic consumption ideals. Very proud to propose.
Thank you. Welcoming LO to open the case of OO. Here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay, so my POI is reversed by chat. So if you have any POI, please just put it in the chat. So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so judges, I have one rebuttal for opening government. So opening government say that drugs not accepted by people. But why is it not accepted? They didn't explain it before. Yes, because yes, of course, drugs is not accepted because it is danger for people's health. Even if it's natural, it is still give effect that even yourself can't control, because we need a long time to know the capacity of our own brain to accept new things and drugs. Hallucinogens are one of them, because in this case we only focus on hallucinogens as the drug. So I will explain more about hallucinogens in this context. And the wrong level certainly has a bad influence on people's health. So if the environmentalist wants to use something that is not ourselves, it will obviously be difficult, because it takes a long time for ourselves to know our capacity. So how about people and other people? So let alone other people. So now I will turn into my argument. So environmentalists must support the preservation, restoration, and or improvement of the natural environment. And it can be called a movement to control pollution or protect plant and animal diversity. For this reason, concepts such as land ethics, environmental ethics, biodiversity, ecology, and the biophilia hypothesis are the dominant. At its core, environmentalists must seek to balance the relationship between humans and the various natural systems on which humans depend in such a way that all components receive appropriate treatment for their sustainability. The environment and environmental problems are often represented by the color green. Hallucinogens are a type of psychotropic that can cause hallucinatory effects and change people's feelings, thoughts, and often create different perspectives so that all feelings can be disturbed. The effects of these drugs, hallucinogens, when consumed in certain doses, can cause a person to hallucinate by saying something that doesn't really exist or is not real. For example, heroin and LSD, like said in the motion. So although there are several countries that have legalized these hallucinogens, many countries are still fighting against hallucinogens, including hallucinogens. Because what? Because even so, these drugs, these hallucinogens can be dangerous and have a very bad impact if used by irresponsible people. Because we know not all humans are responsible for themselves. In fact, many humans are still irresponsible. And besides, hallucinogens are also dangerous for those responsible people because so it will be even worse if they are in the hands of irresponsible people. In this case, we are going to focus on the hallucinogens that contain in the motion like I said before. Sorry. So, like I said before, hallucinogens still can be dangerous for people that are responsible because hallucinogens can trigger the brain to release serotonin, causing hallucinatory effects that can affect emotion and affective thought as if everything that is seen is real. People who are affected by hallucinogen substance will find it difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is their imaginary. And not only that, the effects of hallucinogen have an effect on the peripheral nervous system, resulting in blurred vision, sleep disturbance, and excessive fear. This is currently very dangerous if someone is affected by hallucinogens. Even if the environmentalist want to fantasize that those around him are monsters, other terrible things, he can attack and damage everything around him, including the environment. And instead of improving the environment as an environmentalist aim to make it worse, want to influence people under the influence of hallucinogens to become environmental stewards, but it is possible that they have hallucinations that are not in accordance with the environmentalist expectation and move out of their control because they are too relaxed because of the hallucinogens, of course. Because the number of the hallucinogens that can be received or processed by the brain and nerves in each individual so that the individual can relax as environmentalist desire is different. Each individual has different capacities and limitations. And in some countries, it is illegal for an environmental to continue to do so. It is clear that this will violate the law. So this method also have many shortcomings and limitations that cannot be resolved. Even if this method is applied, it can only be applied in countries where hallucinogens are legalized. While the aim of caring for the environment at this time is, of course, to reduce air pollution and inhibit the increase of in Earth's temperature and climate change, which is getting worse every year, so that all countries and all human beings should help take care of this environment. It will be very useless if only small part of the countries blocks this climate change. Therefore, it would be better to use a method that is acceptable in all state laws, and also many things are better than just in solving problems. Meditation is one of them. That's all of me. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, DPM, the floor is yours.
Test, am I audible? assuming I am POIs through chat, yeah.
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, cool. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. This debate needs to operate on the concession that cannabis and any other natural substances that alter human consciousness is an inevitably growing business, right? This is a trend that is actually happening in the current status quo. So all's attempt at the contribution by talking about how it's dangerous to people's health shouldn't matter much, right? Because regardless of whether or not it's dangerous, first of all, ratios exist and health mitigation exists. Obviously, there's going to be a healthy amount of dose that people are allowed to take. There's going to be limitations as well. So it's not going to be that rampant. But second of all, talking about how even if it is dangerous to people's health, most likely these people are already consented to using it, right? It's not like this kind of natural drug use is going to be forced upon other people. So this debate should be discussing regarding how this trend is and how environmentalists best utilize this momentum and whether or not they're going to strategize by like allying themselves with this growing movement, right? And I've already explained to you regarding how this is good because we're going to be promoting culture, right? On 2 levels. First of all, we're going to be talking about how this is protecting the indigenous people whose culture has been stigmatized unfairly, talking about how cannabis was criminalized, not necessarily on the grounds that it is dangerous to human health, obviously like in overdoses cases, but more likely because like back then US was racist and trying to pin something barbaric against Mexicans, right? Second of all, talking about how we're going to be able to promote an organic lifestyle because besides of like, because the usage of natural substances as part of a culture is able to penetrate people's minds and understandings, talking about how probably that means that organic culture is something that is sustainable and something that's beneficial for you individually. So something that is good to research more and try to tap more into, right? So I'm going to be extending on that regarding about how then recreational tripping and recreational drug use is something that is inevitable. It is popular cost, therefore it's best if environmentalists just ally themselves with it, right? Why is this so? Because we noticed about how exactly as has been conceded by everyone, it is previously known that as a drug that is harmful, right? As something that's going to ruin human body and so on and so forth. This is false Caucasian propaganda that is trying to do so, right? And the fact that there is a significantly growing movement that is able to garner enough support to the point where they decriminalize it, first of all. Second of all, is able to build like good like rehabilitation centers for it if you got overdosed. But third of all, is able to create good business models coming from it, means that this is a movement that is able to actually bring out the goals of their own movement, right? That being said, we think that in this debate, it should also be discussed that environmentalists should ally themselves with strategic partners in forwarding that goal. For example, getting like environmentally friendly policies and so on and so forth, right? 5 analyses as to why then recreational tripping movement is something that's strategic to ally with. First of all, they're also anti-government, right? In the sense that they are also used to the strategies that is being used by social movements to ally the government, recognizing how they're able to lobby governments to the point where they manage to decriminalize cannabis and all these other drugs, right? That means that it's also in line with environmentalists. They're trying to change the law, that are also trying to lobby the government into making more environmentally friendly policies, right? So first of all, they're anti-government as well. Second of all, they are also nature loving, right? People who use cannabis and so on and so forth are hipsters and so on and so forth that recognize that nature is something that is good for human being and should be sustained to the point where you want to grow cannabis and make sure that they live in like a good laboratory and so on and so forth, right? So it's easier for us to instill like the healthiness and our other values that are, for example, anti-corporate or wanting to fight against illegal logging and so on and so forth. It's easier for them to understand. But third of all, these people has less fear and are more consistent in when it comes to its support, right? Because the fight for cannabis is also almost like as long as the fight for the environment, right? It is the long sustaining movement, and they're able to do things like physical protests or making sure like hiding people who are affected by it and so on and so forth. So it's more likely for them to follow into the same agenda once environmentalists need protection, right? But fourthly, this is something that's booming between the younger demographic of the United States and all these other countries and Netherlands, which means that we're able to tap into a demographic that was previously hard to infiltrate as the environmentalists, right? Talking about how this is probably less booming in comparison to other social movements. We do not necessarily like occupy as much online spaces as we should. So we think that by aligning ourselves with recreational tripping, we're able to tap into that market. But lastly, right, talking about how it is a booming business currently, right? Talking about how after the legalization, there are lots of business creating licenses to try and sell natural substances and so on and so forth, right? Why this is good is because one, it is sure that they're going to generate profit because there's so many like natural substance users in the current status quo. But second of all, realistically, environmentalists need funding. Environmentalists need a lot of money for them to campaign, for them to lobby governments, for them to support politicians who are, for example, pro-environment and so on and so forth, right? Therefore, we think that what happens after all this, if we're able to ally ourselves with people who are pro-natural substances and we're able to prove that we are also like supporting their causes, we think it's going to create a good mutually beneficial relation between the both of them, right? So then second extension is regarding why people are not going to leave the cause, right? We think that what happens within this, even if we do support something that's not popular among few members of society, is that what happens is going to be like in every other movement, it's just going to be a diversification of members with one common goal, right? We can see this, for example, in how people who support Black Lives Matter, they still have diversification in it. You still have, for example, homophobic people who support Black Lives movements, who you still have people who are like not necessarily have the exact same political view, right? We think that this is common, this is healthy, and this is something that's feasible that happens in the current status quo, right? But notice about how this is also possible because the nature of the movement for environment is different from other social movements like BLM or LGBTQ plus allies, right? For example, for you to support the environment, it's as simple as choosing which kind of brands are sustainable and not exploitative towards the environment, right? You don't necessarily have to go to the streets and protest and so on and so forth. So even if there are people with conflicting opinions upon cannabis and all these other natural substances, we think that the conflict between these members are not going to be that massive, right? People are still going to strive towards the one common massive goal, which is to fight global warming in their own respective ways, right? We think that especially because like the nature of the movement for environmentalism is something that most likely is something that's done individually, for example, through voting, through better choice buying and boycotting certain products. We think that it's just much more possible for different political opinions on natural substance to still exist and to still persist within this, right? We think that the most important thing is that we're able to get strategic allies for us to forward our movements and forward our agendas in the parliament. That's why we're proud to propose.
Thank you. Last speaker of the opening house, DLO, please.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep.
Okay then I will start my speech in 3, 2, and 1. Ladies and gentlemen, notice that today we're going to discuss about the usage of the LSD, the hallucinogen towards that we as the environmentalists should making proud of it or making people know about it or even promote it and ask people to use it. First of all, we're going to tell you again and again that my previous speaker already said the effect that has been caused by the hallucinogen, and it is based on the data that already being found and being tested by a lot of chemists, all of medical research. And yeah, all of this data will be right there because we are dealing about with the psychedelic and everything that will make you hallucinate, and which means will making you saying that something is not real, but you can see it. And the real deal with this kind of act is we are afraid of people who cannot be responsible enough with themselves. Yeah, the government said that they can take the limited proportion or they have their own portion, but can you promise us that people who gave in with their problem, with their stress, will just get like the proportion that they will be needed? No, we think not. Because why? They need their stress to be gone, or they need their problems to be gone. But here's the fact: when you give yourself into the hallucinogen, yeah, you will feel relief, you will be relaxed. But the problem that you are facing right now is not even solved or gone. It's just being held on. So when the effect just goes off and you being relaxed, let's say that you can think about the problem solver from those kind of problems. But when you actually fail to give the solver towards the problem, ain't you going to go back with the way that you have to relax yourself? So those kind of acts that we really don't want people to get in there. And the second one is the image of the environmentalist is being at stakes when you give a promotion to this kind of things that may even ruin your image as a good movement, because we know that preserving the environment throughout preserving the environment itself is a good movement that I think that not only should environmentalists do that, but also us as a human being who live in this planet. And yeah, regarding that, the government said about they want to promote the organic consumption, but something there is a little bit problem with that opinion, because we believe that if you want to promote this organic lifestyle, you should not just straight up give them the best thing. Yeah, we admit that the organic matters is not really tasty, it's not really appealing, but it will be the different cases when you consume organic needs within the organic drugs. Because why? We take example from jamu. We all of us know what is jamu. Jamu is a traditional medication for people in Indonesia, especially in Java. And the effect when you give people jamu is their problems. I mean, the things that going wrong in their body will be relieved or will be healthy, but not as fast as the modern medicine, of course. But it will be different cases when you give them drugs. It makes them realize, but doesn't you really consider about the effects towards their body? Doesn't you really concern about their own healthiness? Okay, they will feel happy, but does it make them safe, ladies and gentlemen? These kind of things, we know why the drugs, either the modern drugs, either the organic drugs, is being illegalized by the government itself, because those kind of things that that attacking the society. The government wants to have the society that can control themselves, can act responsible. But by you giving this kind of not by you just consuming this kind of stuff, you will lose control of yourself, and you being unresponsible. Even if you are a responsible person, when you don't have your own control of your body and you make mistake, who will be responsible for the fault? No one knows. You will be giving the saying that, oh, I'm not in control of my body. No, we cannot do that kind of stuff. Yeah, we admit that some of the country did legalize this kind of things, such as Brazil, Jamaica, Netherlands, Peru. But a lot of the world is against all of those kind of things, because just making this kind of act doesn't really wise as the environmentalists when we want to preserve the nature and want to the human to give a good life. But yeah, it will make us the movement itself being hard, because what comes to illegal many places, the act won't be justified and clearly hard to realize. When you want to legalize this kind of stuff, it will be hard, because people nowadays knows what the effect of drugs. Many people have the intelligence, and many seminars that have been done to know our word towards drugs. Yeah, okay, the drugs by they mean is the modern drugs like narcotics and etc. But this hallucinogen also one of those kind of drugs, narcotics, and yeah, I'm sorry, hallucinogens is not narcotic. Okay, and yeah, making the act in the conclusion is making the act as realized as soon as possible will also bring many controversies toward our movement. And we admit that many people will agree who don't want their stress to be relieved, who don't want they feel that they don't have problems or burden in their life. But we must know that the act isn't wise enough to be created, because why? Those kind of things already delivered by my previous speaker, how the bad things that will happen toward our body, how the bad things toward our mind. Ladies and gentlemen, we want our society to be good as possible. We want our movement to be fluent as possible. Yeah, we want to, okay, you want to people know to organic stuff, but it doesn't, it's different when you give them drugs. It's different when you want to preserve their healthiness, their physical appearance, their mental. It's different. Drugs isn't that easy to become and cold to our body, ladies and gentlemen. It will bring more harm than goods. So yeah, okay. We still doesn't have the good point towards this, why we should justify drugs towards our society, although we want to give the best image to others. So we beg you to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. To open the closing half, I would like to welcome member of GOF here.
Okay, setting up my timer. My gender pronouns are she or her, and if you want to POI, just interrupt my speech. Okay, so starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. What we see from the opposition case, they only bring the harms of people using drugs. They don't really support anyone or anything. They don't really cater to the interest of environmentalists. So we can't credit their case at all. And they don't even engage to opening government's case about indigenous people they are talking about. We can't credit the opposition case at all. So we're just going to first rebut. We're just going to first rebut some points and prove to the opposition case why the government case will still win over opposition. Okay, the first one, they asked to us, can you make sure that the portion is just right so that the people won't be addicted or the bad effects will affect their health? We say yes, because if we promote natural substances, it means that we are gaining professional help, like psychologists and psychiatrists that use natural substances as their way to help people with problems. So it will be the right portion, and people will not recklessly use that and being irresponsible by themselves. And then second thing, they said that but by promoting the usage of natural substances, they said that the environmentalist reputation will be bad. We say it won't happen, because what we are exactly doing is to delete the bad stigma upon bad effects of drugs. So we come up with the idea of optimizing the use of organic substance that the environmentalists are promoting, right? Yes, I will take the POI now. Yes, POI. Okay. Yeah.
So you're going to erase the false stigma, but notice that it's not just a stigma, but it's also research. So how will you do about that?
Yes. We're talking about natural substances, which is really different from drugs that is manufactured in companies, right? So if we support the use of natural substances, it means that we create healthier option for people that still want to cover their stress or their life problems, to at least use the healthier option by these natural substances, right? And then I will explain it more in my arguments, which is my argument is why the environmentalists promoting the usage of natural substances will engage more in existing society, in which the opening government have brought about they will protect vulnerable actors in LGBT or the indigenous people they talk about. We are going to engage more in people who exist in the society, which is problem which is people with personal problem, right? And then by doing this, it means that we will engage and the psychologists and psychiatrists to use these natural substances to help people with problem, right? As we have said, before, these people are not going to have bad effects and so on and so forth, because they have this professional help from the people, and we assume that you know exactly that psychiatrists use drugs to help their patients, right? So we as the environmentalists will come up with this healthier option. And then the second one, when the environmentalists start to promote, it will attract the society attention, and also the government and people will start to question is whether if it's actual whether if natural substances is good or bad, and the environmentalists will prove that it is truly beneficial, so that people will start to legalize, and not seeing it as bad again, and then the stigma will slowly gone, right? And then another people that we will engage are people in international organizations, in which opposition said that not all country legalize the use of drug or natural substances. We say that we are going to engage people in international relations. We are going to gain communal energy, and then it will start a discussion between countries, and then the environmentalist job is exactly to tell them that that these natural substances are not bad, and then if these people who formerly illegalized these natural substances will have discussion with the country that has legalized it, and they will start to use these natural substances again and legalize it in their countries themselves. We say this is likely to work because these natural substances are proven by the environmentalists that it will help people, and what the countries have the country have citizens who have exactly life problems, right? So we can cater more in people who needs help, and then we are going to support the psychologists and psychiatrists in using these natural substances. They can make sure and use and optimizing the use of this organic substance, right? And that concludes all of my speech. We are so proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcoming member of OP to open the case of CEO. Here.
I'm the member of opposition. If you have any POI, you can give the POI on the chat section. And my pronouns is she, her. Okay, I'm gonna start the speech in 3, 2, 1. Promoting drug usage to solve environmental causes is like solving problem by adding another disastrous events to solve it. First off, I would like to differentiate our case from the opening opposition by saying that our contribution in this case compared to the OO is that we will explain the actual impact from this policy if this policy is run to the environment. And the second one, what we will also explain what better ways can we do to actually preserve the environment instead of promoting the usage of these natural substances. First off, I would like to give 3 points of clarification towards the government bench. I would like to first respond to this. When the nature is giving benefit to us and us championing unhealthy causes such as promoting drug usage is such a backlash to our cause. First point that I would like to clarify from the government bench is that the opening government stated that they would go hand in hand with indigenous people to protect the earth, right? But they never really explained to us what kind of ways and methods would they use to actually go hand in hand with these indigenous people to protect the earth. The efforts of indigenous people to mitigate and also prevent more environmental disasters in our world that is already so bad, already in a so bad condition, and it's too late to be mitigated, and adaptation efforts is not really effective anymore. We should go for another way, such as adaptation methods by adopting seawalls to prevent the rise of the sea levels, and other adaptation methods. The second point that I would like to clarify from the government bench is that the opening government say that they can have a more benefits, such as they would like to reduce the food waste with LSD, but we would like to say that this is not ethical and this is not effective. First off, why is it not ethical? In the first place, that we can say that we're championing a cause that is unhealthy, and this is the backlash to our movement, to the environmentalist movement, in which we would like to be a healthy society too, right? And the second one, why is this is not effective? We do not see the significance of reducing food waste through LSD. This is not really effective. Are you expecting to reduce a large amount of food waste by tripping all day, by using drugs all day for the rest of the society? It's not simply that effective, right? And the third clarification that I would like to give is that I would like to say that at the end of the day, it's going to hamper our movement. Why? Because we still have people in the gray area, right? We still have people that are unsure about supporting drugs or not. And no, we still have people in the gray area that are unsure to support the environmental causes or not, right? And these people are mostly majority having a stigma towards the usage of drug. They see drug as a negative impact, and they are the majority case in our world, right? And this is why when we promote the usage of drugs, it's going to be bad, because these people will not support our causes, right? These people will simply, no, thank you, I will take the POI later. And this is why we don't want to support these kind of causes. And also, I would like to go to my points later. By normalizing the usage of drugs, then the demand of the usage of drugs itself will go up, right? And we're championing the causes of using. When we're championing the causes of using drugs, people are using it more, abusing it more. People in the urban areas are using it for no apparent causes, and this will give the opportunity to let's say pharmaceutical companies, to big industry, to actually exploit and take the chance to commercialize these kind of drugs. And it has happened before, and we do not want this, because big pharma are profit oriented. They only take on chances, they only profit themselves, and this is bad for the environment. And we will like to explain why the big pharma is actually bad for the environment. And second, we do not want to promote the usage of natural substances. We want to promote a better way of dealing with our climate change right now, which is an adaptation. Going to my arguments, I would like to say that why does these causes backfires the environment? Okay, so even if at the end of the day, people will finally use drugs and finally accept to terms about using the drugs, even people in the conservative area and also in the gray area, and we still believe that using drugs is still backfires our causes. Why? First, we have characterized to you that these pharmaceutical companies that see the chances to actually commercialize the usage of drugs, to commercialize the production of drugs, and that these small businesses will also die, and because they are preferring to use the big pharma. And when there's a growing demand, they're sure the pharmaceutical companies will jump into it, right? And these pharmaceutical companies never care about the environment at the first place. These pharmaceutical companies pollute these environments. Pharmaceutical companies operates in the way they only exploit the forest, they exploit the nature, and they do not give any reparation causes to this environment. And this is bad for our cause. We do not want to regress, right, from our cause. And the second layer to this is that we're championing deforestation. LSD are made from mushrooms, right? Examples that LSD are made from mushrooms. These resources are not simply gained on like the urban areas or the city areas where you can easily find it. You must find these kind of resources deep into the forest, and the government bench might argue that these that by actually having these more incentives to consume more, there will be also a demand to preserve the nature more. But we'll say that this is not true, because because when these resources are taken from the forest and they need places to grow, right? The big pharma will simply, cut off the forest and plants the trees that they actually want to gain these resources. And humans are exploitative in their manner. So the push, the cost to actually preserve the environment will be lessened, will be minimized so badly by this kind of deforestation effort and promote. And we also and these also big farmers also needs places to produce their drugs, right? They will also cut off the forest to build places, to build factories, to actually produce those drugs. And we do not want this as the environmentalist cause. And the second one, we would like to promote adaptation instead of mitigation. Why is it that? Because it's too late. The mitigation efforts gone by the government bench where they are want to continue along the side with the indigenous people to work together. It's just too late for this point. We must adapt because people are starting to die because of this climate change. We must adapt to those changes instead of mitigating these problems because it's just simply too late. And this is why we're proud to oppose.
Thank you. Welcoming GovWhip. The floor is yours. Here.
Okay. Okay, wait a second. Oh, by the way, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, wait, mana di Gatekeeper? Okay. Okay, so my preferred POI methods would be in the chat and my preferred pronouns would be he or him. Wait, mau minum dulu. Okay, I'm going to start my speech. That was okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. We believe that the opposition's world is just very weird, where the most of what they are saying is just drug is bad, it harms your body, it creates addiction, therefore you should not use it, or even to the point where this kind of drug will be monetized, for example, in their side of the house. We say that their definition of drug is bad for the body will just be unfair toward the both side of the world, ladies and gentlemen, because both government benches agree that the definition of the drug that we use should be the drug that is beneficial, that is just maybe is recommended by the psychiatrist to this individual person for either to practice their culture or exactly to improve their health or exactly to cure their sickness, for example, gentlemen. So I think that under definition that drug is a beneficial thing and will be practical thing, we see that opposition can also undergo with this kind of definition that drug is a good thing. But what they need to define, what they need to prove is that why the use of the beneficial drug under the side of the house will still bad and does not in line with the idea of environmentalists, ladies and gentlemen. Because in our side, we say that the use of this drug is already consented. People already know the risks. People are matured enough to know the problem that they will get, and they're okay with it because as long as their their sickness can be cured, for example, outside of the house. But second, opposition's words never characterize what kind of things that the world that they want to promote under the side of the house. They just saying that, oh, under opposition's side of the house, as in opening opposition, they would use another method such as meditation, or in the closing opposition, they're just using another method such as adaptation. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that it is not enough to give the parameter, because if you are going with the case of opposition, let's say when you are going with the idea of meditation, it's not clear that why this kind of meditation is in line with the idea of environmentalists achieving their goal, and the same goal goes to to the closing opposition where they talk about adaptation. What kind of adaptation that they mean to do anyway? Because in our side, we think that it is hard anyway to achieve the idea of adaptation from these people to work with the environmentalists, ladies and gentlemen. So those are like some big clarification that I want to go with the opposition sides. So I'm going to divide my speech into 3 parts. First, I want to have like some independent rebuttals toward closing opposition, especially. And second, I want to bring like comparison or engagement through the debate. And third, I want to bring that why our argument is the most important argument in this debate, ladies and gentlemen. But before I'm moving into it, we want to give you much clear context that the interest of environmentalists is not only focusing on the environmental issue, but also focusing on the human issue, politic issue, economic issue. For example, the existence of Paris Agreement is being made not only to tackle down the climate change, but also to make sure that the financial flow of the creating technologies would be much better. Or, for example, the existence of Green New Deal. It's not only about how you cater the problem of climate change, but also cater the social aims, ladies and gentlemen. So under our side, that these environmentalists should also consider another human aspect being in order for them to gain ally, in order for them to gain support, so their goal can be achieved in the future, ladies and gentlemen. One point of independent rebuttals toward the closing opposition. They say that it will reduce the carbon emissions reduce won't be significant just because you alter human consciousness. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of carbon emission or like the significance should not be the topic of this debate, ladies and gentlemen, because under both sides, obviously, we agree that this kind of altered human consciousness cannot just like abolish kind of carbon emission, ladies and gentlemen. The point of the debate should on how this kind of environmentalists can gain support, can gain ally in order for their goal to work, in order for their goal to be approachable to many sides, so that many sides can have them, ladies and gentlemen. So I think that under the point of carbon emission, it won't work, ladies and gentlemen. So moving into my substantives, I'm going to bring like comparison as in 2 layers. First, under the idea of which proposals in line with the goal environmentalists. Second, under the idea of humanity. Right. First, under the idea on on which proposal is in line with the goal environmentalists, ladies and gentlemen. Under their side of the house, they're not using this kind of natural products, right? They will just use another method. As I said before, this kind of method does not make sense in self-assessment because it will take a longer time. The process would be uncertain. And meanwhile, the condition is that natural substances is needed for these people at the current moment, ladies and gentlemen. So their product is not that good, ladies and gentlemen. Under our side, we say that this kind of product is actually, if you use natural over manufactured product, it will be less waste and it will be much environmental friendly, and then the price could be much cheaper and everyone can get it for their own benefit. But if we want to bring the idea of benefit that has been brought by the opening government, we want to bring the idea of benefit as in financial by saying that we can still monetize this kind of natural substances that hard to be got. But the proposal that we want is that we will create company that keeps the natural substances to be pure. For example, like in area A, there exists a natural substances that is like only exists in that area, and the price is high, ladies and gentlemen, and that is why people are competing for that. So we think that the competition would be better under our side. Meanwhile, on their side of the house, if they use this kind of monetize and big pharmacy, we always say that there exists CSR, corporate social responsibility, if I'm not mistaken. So we think that this kind of companies can still do the form of corporate social responsibility, and I think that is better understanding the current condition itself, ladies and gentlemen. But second, under the idea of comparison in the humanity itself, under our side, there will be like chances for people to use it, and people will trust this kind of environmentalists. They will support whatever this environmentalist done, because this environmentalist has done much thing toward this. So the humanity will be much better under our side. So why our argument is so important? Because we can prepare, because we can, give more clearance and comparison. That's all from me. Proud to propose. Thank you.
Thank you. Would like to welcome Opweb to the floor. Here.
Am I audible?
Yep.
My POI preference is if like there's any POI.
Oh, I have the chat up so I can see you. If I have time, I will take you. So yeah. I'm gonna start my speech in 3. Gosh, wait. 3, 2, 1. The aim of environmentalists in general is to protect environment, right? We think that it is because they want a betterment for humanity. When LSD is an actual and addicts you long term, we think that that is the underlying reasons as to why we should stop the kinds of supportments. And some clarification first. I think the number one is that there is no kinds of consensus here how polarizing drug is, because we need to point out here that in the US it is a very small minority of states that actually passes legalizing of drugs, right? We don't think that drugs is something that is really universally accepted, and that is what we need to point out here. And second of all, the things to point out here, OG and CG cannot come up here and say that the effect of drugs, there's no side effect at all, because we say that it's long term, because the nature of drugs in and of itself, it addicts you, right? You want more and more things like hallucination drugs, and therefore harms your mental health, right? That is what we pointed out, and we think that CG is the only going to be the only team that champions how this long-term side effects can actually harm the environments, right? So what we talk about when we talk to you about 2 things. But before I like to point out that OO, right, is very fixated on how it only gives side effect and therefore drug is bad, but there's no explanation as to why it harms the environment. So we think that OO should not be within this debate. And we talk to you how this backfires in environments, because this promotes the demand and therefore promotes the pharmaceutical companies, right, to cut towards the majority of society. Is the pharmaceutical companies give waste and that drowns on rivers, kinds of any water substances that actually harms the environment itself, right? Notice, for example, LSD also gives deforestations because it needs land in order to thrive, right? We think that promoting natural substances, we talked to you how about it promotes logging also, because lands in order to thrive these kinds of natural substances, right? So at the end of the day, it is back in the environments, and at the end of the day, it just harms the environments. So let's move on to my independent rebuttal. The only thing that she to you is that drugs should be normalized. We think that there is several kinds of reasons why there's no kinds of reasons why this is so important for drugs to be normalized as an environment. Why by normalizing drugs will make people much more better in terms of environmental issues. I don't think there's lack of an explanation of that. And they say here is that the drug will be progressed in a way that it promotes your mental health and it promotes the better stigma, and therefore this is what environmentalists want, right? We think there is no kinds of explanation as to why environmentalists wants to these kinds of things. Okay, they say then it attracts discord. We think that still there is no kinds of we need to point out of harms that there's no kinds of benefits towards the environment, the kinds of discourses that will happen at the end of the day. So we think that in and of itself is not important, and it's not the tipping point of this debate. So I'm going to bring you 2 classes here. The first is which side better promote the environment, and lastly, which side better is strategic for environmentalist movement. First clash, which side the government argues is that drug heightens consciousness, and therefore people will try to relate about environments. But there's 2 responses. One, there's no explanation as to why drug is so unique in way it will automatically makes you care about environment. Would you even come up they are recreational in nature. So we don't think that when you use LSD, therefore I will help at the end of the day. And they say then the impacts that it would lessen food waste, right? Because psychedelics makes you less hungry. We think that this is problematic arguments in a way that it is ethically ethically abhorrent in a way that you remove the informed consent of society, because here you make hallucinate into these decisions. And secondly, it is worsen the sustainability, because the sustainability we want is like long-term kind of environmental protections. Because the moment when you stop using this is the moment when you stop like feeling the numbness of hungry, right? Notice how you're much more likely to get hungry by that point, right? Because you numb this pain of hungry, you're much more likely to eat more. But then at that point, that is the point that food waste will much more likely to go up at the end of the day, and environment will be harmed. So we think that on oppositions, we have already talked to you. How about pharmaceutical companies that will create drugs and therefore waste that can harm the environments? How this like these psychedelic drops can make needs to be in, and therefore it promotes logging, and therefore it harms the environments in and of itself. So we think that on cases environments, you should like try to go to oppositions. And second clash is environmentalists. We told you that number one, this is controversial in a way that this is polarized things. We told you how this can break up movements. Sila told you how this, we think that this will lose you allies. People like anti-drugs and the rest of the world, and the rest of internal community, the one that you want be with you when they don't agree with drugs as a means to protect the environment. We think that is at a point you lose allies, right? We think that it's much more likely for you to, at the end of the day, lose support that way. And second of all, we talk to you that there's other ways that are already progressing. There's concession from OG that people are already championing environmental. And second of all, we think that adaptation towards climate change is much better than promoting the idea of using LSD in order to help the climate change, right? We think that that in and of itself is much more like morally consistent, morally better, and at the end of the day, we think that those in and of itself much better, much strategic for environmentalists, because it is like something that's universally accepted. But on government side of the house, they want to protect indigenous people. We think no kinds of arguments coming from them on why this is so important to protect the indigenous people. But even if it is, we think that environmentalists have no responsibility towards them, because the state has failed them, right? Not the environmentalists in it of itself, right? We think that those kind of things should not be the parameter for you to make a strategic approach to movement. And secondly, they talk about how this promote organic culture. We think that the organic culture clear, because for example, they want the organic culture to take salads, but there is no explanation as to why people will automatically eat more because they eat LSD, right? Because we think that there's 2 points, is that there's no burden for oppositions to prove to you why people will much more likely to eat organic culture when they don't eat like LSD, right? We don't think there is a burden for us, right? And last thing they're going to talk about is because they're allies. The point here is because they're anti-government. Because we think that there's no parameter for you allies just because they're anti-government. Because not all environmentalists are anti-government, right? There's bureaucrats, for example, that works within the government. And we think that this is bad examples and bad allies for environmentalists, because they, for example, they overdose, right? They harm themselves, right? Even if they don't overdose, I think that they are just a bad example in general, because these people are not the one that promotes environment, but these people are the one that promotes drugs, not the environment. For all of those reasons, go for closing opposition.
Thank you all for that speech. I would like